Good morning, everyone. Tis time, tis time. We today are somehow or another, it is February 12th, which I don't even know how that's possible, but we are on wild card number 6. It is never too late to encourage people to sign up, so feel free. Um, I'm not sharing screen anymore. It stopped doing that. Sure did. Great. Now I am sharing screen again. Perfect. Today we're going to be doing a similar process that we did when we did the race and racism worksheet. Not worksheet, workshop. So it's the same process, but we're going to be focusing on religion, politics, and just belief systems. I have found with my clients that this is a conversation people need to have and are the most like itchy about having, specifically in a work context. So I just kind of want to name that up front and encourage everyone to do their own work. You are having a conversation with yourself, and this is a raucous conversation you're going to have about your own belief systems. I am not here, at least during this hour, to tell you what to believe correctly. We can do that later if you like. But I want you to notice what you believe and what are messages you've learned about those beliefs. When we talk about this, I do think it's important, especially when we open it up for breakout groups, to kind of talk about the easy, hard next promise, is that I am not encouraging what is the right thing to believe, what is the moral right thing to believe. It's not that kind of conversation. I am happy to sit down and pick a beverage and we will have a conversation about that, because I don't believe in moral relativism. I believe in one sense of morality, but sometimes that gets really confusing when you say things like, for example, genocide is never an answer. I believe that to be true. Some people are like, well, let's talk about it. So I'm happy to have those conversations, but I'm a trained professional. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to have a conversation with yourself. Some of you are like, I'm a trained professional, just did something else. But I want you to have a raucous conversation with yourself about the messages you have learned about your religious or political beliefs. Does that make sense? So the conversation we're going to be having today is not about what our religious or political beliefs are necessarily, but what are messages we have learned about them. Spoiler alert, go all the way back to the very first webinar and remember that these conversations are rooted in what our definitions of responsibility and agency are. And often that is the biggest difference when we're starting to have conversations with each other. So if need be, you can kind of start there, feel each other out, and then have a conversation about messages you have learned about your own religious or political beliefs. So don't forget to follow me on the Instagram, and my texting number is 202-670-4262. Interestingly, I have not gotten very many texts during the webinars, but I am getting a ton of texts in the evening and over the weekend. So keep the conversation going. It makes me feel like I'm doing a good job of being thought-provoking. You can text me anytime you want about anything. I can't wait. 202-670-4262. Now, because it is a Messages I Learned program, we are going to do the 4 prompts. So you are going to need paper and pen. A couple of people have stated, or at least come out to me as they do not like pen and paper, so they're doing it on an iPad. You do you, boo. I'm old school. I need pen and paper. So get whatever you need. You're going to need it though, so don't not get it. That's important. Okay, so once you have your pen and paper, you are then going to divide it up into 4 sections. You can do this with a plus, you can do this with an X, you can fold it, but not unless it's an iPad. And then you're going to number those 4 sections, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to walk you through 4 different prompts. For those of you that maybe weren't on the disability and accessibility conversation this weekend or the race and racism conversation last week, it's the same process. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to reflect and leave breadcrumbs for yourself about yourself of the messages that you have learned. Today, we're going to focus on our belief systems. So each prompt you can go back and visit later as we move on to other prompts. You do not have to fax this to me. Most of you don't even have a fax machine. And I'm pretty sure that almost none of you even live in my little town in the middle of nowhere. Although a couple of people did register, so maybe you're here. But you don't have to give me your sheet of paper at the grocery store or anything like that. It's a conversation for you, about you, with you. That's what we're doing today. Good? Okay. High fives. Give me some fives in the chat so that I know that your paper is set up and you are ready to go. And then I will launch into the first prompt with the timer, and I'll mute, have my morning beverage while you are leaving yourself breadcrumbs. So first prompt, we're going to spend about 5 minutes on, and I want you to sit with yourself about what are all the messages that you have learned about your belief system. Now, I will throw out the part of the reason I love this particular activity is that my biggest lesson from my archival research with Mother Teresa was that she constantly questioned everything she believed in. And so some of us even get defensive at that idea. So I just want to throw out that if whatever you believe in survives your own questioning process, you're just going to believe in it that much stronger, but you'll be able to have a conversation with someone else about why you believe whatever it is that you believe, but it has to survive your own questioning process. This is just a reflection about what you have learned about your beliefs. So I'm going to shut up and hit mute and give you about 5 minutes for you to leave breadcrumbs for yourself about what you have learned, messages you have learned across your life from different belief systems or processes that you have held or hold. Ready? Here you go. You're about halfway through quadrant number 1. Okay, you should be wrapping up that section. Remember, you can go back to this section anytime you need to as we move along to the other prompts. That breathing stuff, free. So go ahead, do the in and the out. Notice how you're feeling about leaving yourself breadcrumbs. Also notice if things came up for you and you edited it out. I always think that's fascinating when I sit here while I'm on mute, I sit here and think about the quadrants too. And my inside voice is like, oh, you can't say that. I am my own audience about the life I have experienced. I thought of an idea that I then disqualify, reminding myself. That's a lot of hurdles going on up in here, and I'm responsible for all of them. So just notice what's happening out there with you. Okay, we're going to move on to the second quadrant. So these are messages that you learned about people other than you. So people other than you who have different belief systems, different faiths, different political beliefs, whatever, however you're deciding what you mean by belief systems, but they're different than yours at any point in time in your life. What are messages that you learned about them over there? Them. Write that down, see what it is. You're about halfway through. Okay, so you're wrapping up the second section. And like the typical process, what ends up happening is that you have had a quadrant about yourself, and then you have a quadrant about everybody else. But we end up picking the most extreme examples of everybody else, or the most binary, obvious everybody else. So quadrant number 3 gives some space for everybody else, because we tend to miss people. We tend to leave people out of quadrant 2. So I want you to take a moment and notice who made it into quadrant 2 and who is left. So you're going to give quadrant number 3 space for messages that you learned about even more people other than you, or other than your own political beliefs across your lifetime. You're going to leave yourself some breadcrumbs about even more other people than quadrant 2 or quadrant 1. So I'll give you some time. I'll mute. Thanks for playing along. You're about halfway through. All right, so you're wrapping up your third quadrant. Again, that breathing thing, free. Take a big inhale, hold it for just a second. Exhale, no copay required. So then as we move into quadrant 4, this is a time you're going to leave yourself breadcrumbs of across your life when you have colluded or participated in marginalizing or silencing someone else because of their belief system. Now, I do think what's interesting specifically with this particular lens is that sometimes we are actively colluding or participating against someone's belief systems that we used to hold, and now we no longer hold it. So we tend to be like extra collusion-y or participate-y in silencing members of a belief system that we used to hold. Um, Sometimes it's belief systems we've never held. But I want you to think of when you have colluded or participated in marginalizing or silencing others with a different belief system than your own. And just in case this is the first time you're going through this process, what I mean by collusion is you were conscious of shenanigans occurring, but you didn't do anything about it. So you didn't actively do shenanigans, but you didn't actively stop shenanigans. And by participate, I mean you were actively involved in shenanigans. So, messages you learned about those times where you colluded or participated in marginalizing or silencing someone with a different belief system than your own. So, I will give you some time. You're about halfway through this prompt. All right, go ahead and finish up the one you're working on and turn your paper over. When you turn your paper over, I'm going to ask you to breathe again. It's a pattern. And then again, the texting number is 202-670-4262. Send your text any way it's possible that you'd want. And then I want you to do a plus or an X. The back side of your paper. I just want you to take note of kind of what's in your body, what's up for you right now. So when you make your plus or your X, two of the quadrants are easy and hard. And I want you to jot down right now, however it is you are feeling or doing, what is easy and what is hard. But Jess, do I mean in life in general, or do I mean about this activity? Yes, I don't care. It's a conversation with yourself. Knock it out. What was easy? What was hard? What is easy? What is hard? What's up in you? Go ahead and take some time and make those notes about easy and hard for you. Easy and hard. Leave yourself some breadcrumbs. Then for the next two quadrants, often when you are being, or when I am being self-reflective, all of a sudden my action self kicks in and I assign myself homework. So I have things I need to do next. I have things I'm promising myself I need to be held accountable for. If you have any next or promises, feel free to put them down on your sheet of paper, which is a conversation from yourself to yourself about yourself of what your future self is going to be doing and what your current self is going to hold your future self accountable for. This is why you need pen and paper, because I say things like that. So, is there anything you need to do next? Is there any promises that you are making to yourself or others? Sounds great. Jot those things down. Great. Easy, hard, next, and promise. So what I've done is I have automatically made some breakout rooms. Most of the rooms have two people in them. Some of them have three. If you get to your room and you're the only one in it, I will move people around. So just wait a little bit and I'll get you there. Some of you are like, I don't want to do breakout rooms. So just stay in this room, but you're going to have to talk to me. I know. And some of you aren't going to do that either. It's Zoom. It's a free world. This is a free webinar. Get out of it, whatever you need. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms. And what I'm going to ask you to do there is not flip your sheet of paper over. You do not have to do that. But what I'm going to ask you to do in your breakout rooms is share something that was easy, hard, next, or promise with your completely randomly assigned breakout group and have a raucous conversation. I will interrupt you because that is basically my job. But you have about 10 minutes in your breakout rooms. So I'm going to open those rooms now. Those of you not in breakout groups, if you would like to have a conversation with me, we are happy to. You are also welcome to use this 10 minutes to go get a beverage or whatever you need to do. I do not do mandatory participation.
I guess I'll share. I felt like it was easy to recall. I kind of geared it towards religious things that I was raised with, and
Okay.
So it was easy to recall things I was taught and what I was expected to follow. Um, but it was difficult kind of sitting with, as I've gotten older, like the inconsistencies of that belief system and assumptions about others and the us versus them kind of uh, focus in many
Mhm.
ways.
It's interesting, I think, like if we're talking about religion. So to me, my language, you didn't say this, but my language is religion is a lot about faith.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where I am totally fine suspending gravity, my knowledge of science, logic, and having faith in something. I am totally fine with that, right? Like, will Adele ever have a concert in a town in which I'm in and have free time that I can afford? You know what? Yes, she sure will. I have no evidence that that is a true factoid, but
Mm-hmm.
I like it's not impossible, right? I'm not going to apply logic. I am able to be faithful about that particular thing. Will my business bring in so much money that I can actually pay my husband to not work for a semester because he really wants to ride his bike across the country because he's a nut? Yes. Right? Like build it and they will come. And then when I think about religious faith that I am supposed to be following, which I don't like doing anything I'm supposed to be doing. The first thing I do is apply science and logic. And I'm like, I'm going to need to see some evidence on this. So, what I like about this reflection activity is the activity doesn't tell you what is right or wrong. The activity gives you space to have conversations with yourself about messages you have learned, about things that you have believed, do believe, or still don't believe. We
Mm-hmm.
don't often take that kind of reflective space. Other thoughts or comments or anything you want to share? Or you can go get a beverage. Did anything come up for you that was like a next or a promise?
Um, Kind of both, but just being open-minded and learning about other belief systems, which I feel like I try to be. But I think, like you mentioned earlier, these lingering um, assumptions or whatever you want to call it, even if you're not subscribing to what you used to believe in or affiliated with, there's still like subconscious or it's like it's so trained within you almost like
Mhm.
assumptions you make, even though I don't say I'm affiliated with this belief system, I'm still kind of assigning meaning to other groups that used to happen when I did subscribe to that belief system. So it's kind of like untraining my brain is how I feel about all that.
Mhm. Mhm. Or picking and choosing which bits and pieces to keep.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like if we switch out of religion to politics, um,
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of time telling my friends of like working with my friends of color who like are so terrified of white women
Mm,
because white women have been voting for Trump pretty consistently. And so I
yeah.
have to be like, number one, I'm not saying that's not true. Number two, voter turnout in the United States is deplorable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
6% of the people who are actually capable of voting, because we don't give that right to just anybody, right? We take it away as often as we can. So 6% of the eligible voters on average turn out to vote. So 6% of the random population, of that random 6% of the population of those white women that voted Republican, right? Like then that
Mm-hmm.
somehow helps my friends like navigate an airport because they can feel a little safer understanding those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a white woman, I also can't distance myself that it's my people that are doing this, right? And so I have a belief system that like all women support all autonomy of their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true,
Yeah.
right? That is not true. It is also the case that that is my argument for one particular political piece that's being legislation's being politicized. And they may also prioritize things that I'm not prioritizing, right? So like I consciously, patiently attempt to have conversations to find out what are they, notice I'm
Mm-hmm.
picking my finger, what are they prioritizing that is allowing them to believe something that I cannot believe they believe. And so ultimately, we're prioritizing different things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you're wrong. Like, right? Like that's not in me, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm at least aware that what I'm saying they're wrong about or believing they're wrong about is that we are prioritizing different things related to the same activity.
Yeah.
All right. You're still wrong. But I now understand why I believe I am right because
Right.
I'm supporting what I'm prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fascinating. I had an amazing conversation with a potential client. I never actually ended up working with them, but they're like the coal industry association for anybody who works with coal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And this is during the 2016 presidential election. And the woman that I was talking to seemed like very liberal, etc. So then I, of course, put what my liberal beliefs are onto someone else who just told me they are liberal, which is already a mistake because liberal
Mm-hmm.
to them could be different to liberal to me. But
Mm-hmm.
liberal to her, the problem is that if Hillary Clinton became president, she wouldn't have a job anymore because she believed that her job in the coal industry would be jeopardized by having a Democrat in the office.
Hmm.
Well, can't say you're wrong, but I would also say maybe go get another job, right? Like do some cross training, like, think about the environment in some particular way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's me shoving my beliefs onto
Mm-hmm.
someone else as well. And this is kind of my next and promise, and then I'll shut up and see if you have anything to say. But then my next and promise is can I give space to someone whose livelihood is impacted by something that is a political belief for me?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
so
having this conversation with somebody about the high rates of incarceration and all of that, and something about, I don't know if it was in a show or something, but basically this like small town's um, livelihood was based on, or you talked about it. I think you spoke about this in a different session, like their um, work in the prisons or wherever they were, like that happened to be located in their immediate area, and then these small areas kind of build where the community is the people who work in these facilities, but then the facilities kind of represent this bigger dynamic in our country. And so their livelihoods depend on them going to work and reporting for their job where these people are incarcerated. But I don't know where that story came from, but just kind of that weird idea of they hire people to do this job and it's not necessarily something that is awesome, but these people need to live and need to support themselves. And then if we do away with the prison system thing, these people would lose their jobs. So
mhm.
I don't know. I think about dynamics like that. They're kind of, how do you, I guess it's hard. Then I think of like, how do we fix this? How does how
Mhm.
does anything get fixed?
Well, and how do you, here's another question that I don't know the answer to, but I like to teeter totter on it, right? Is that how do
Mm-hmm.
I ask people to think bigger than themselves
Mm-hmm.
when so much about themselves is already suffering?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to ask that of other people, can I do that to myself? Right. So like kind of like the just rescue activity. Am I like asking them over there to do something, or am I actively participating in the doing of the thing? Even though I don't feel connected to that at all, right? Like if we abolished all prisons, that would not impact me personally.
Right.
Other than I live very close to a maximum security prison. So there's
Hmm.
probably some part in my head that's like, but um, can I do that? Maybe we'll talk about prisons when I pull everybody back together. All right, go get a beverage. I'm going to tell them that I'm going to pull the groups back up. Thanks for talking to me, though. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Come on back, y'all. Okay, they should be here in about a minute. Well, now it's a minute because I forgot to hit a button. Here they come. Okay, don't forget to breathe. That part is free. So Meredith and I had a raucous conversation in the main room, and I'm curious to see if anything came up in the breakout groups that people want to share about easy, hard, next, or promise. I also want to throw out, because I like to say this, is that when sometimes we're engaged in conversations with total stranger, sometimes we are looking at the clock. When is she going to close these breakout rooms? This is awkward. I don't know what to do. Thank you very much. I'm trying to be polite. Let's all go get beverages. That's a great way. You're welcome if you need that for future breakouts. Let's all refill our beverages. And then you get to come back into the big room. Other times you are having a very good conversation. You've lost track of time, and now you're mad at me because I closed the breakout room, and now you're all shoved back into one big group. If the latter happened, welcome to having an authentic conversation. I get paid a lot of money to facilitate authentic conversations that you can do for free. But we often don't spend the time and the energy to be that authentic, that vulnerable, that generous, that curious. So then you need an outside facilitator to come in and eat snacks while y'all are having an authentic conversation. My dogs have sensitive stomachs. Their dog food is very expensive. So this is working out great. But you could have your own authentic conversations all by yourself. Just saying. So now that we have breathed, hopefully breathed, taken in air. How are we doing out there? What came up for easy and hard for you in your small groups? And then maybe Meredith and I'll share in our big group. Anybody want to share? Easy and hard. Let's start there.
I'll say something. Um, one of the difficult things was that I kept, I mean, I would bring up something that I had been taught, and then I would say, but I don't believe that anymore. So my list got, it was kind of like filtering out all of that list of what do I want to put down about what I believe, and then still knowing that a lot of those things aren't part of what I believe anymore.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of like, okay, right. And then I wanted to like line them out.
Cool. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Tim Wise's book, White Like Me. I highly recommend this book, especially if you are interacting with someone who's like on the newer side of self-awareness or social justice or diversity work, specifically if they're a white man. This is the book I recommend first. So Tim Wise, his social justice work started when he was in college around anti-apartheid work in South Africa. And the opening story in the book, spoiler alert, this is the opening story of the book, but his mother has dementia or Alzheimer's, something like that, where her cognitive abilities are declining. And she was a activist, very liberal, super involved in the civil rights movement. And as her dementia, let's say, is building, what's happening is, and Carolyn, this is what you just said made me think of it, is that her skill sets of working around what her kind of initial beliefs and initial culture were fading. And so it takes a lot of work to work around what's innately in here. And by innate, I don't mean like it's a human innate. I mean like it was socialized and culturalized into you before you had a sense of agency to be like, wait, time out, right? Because we live where we live, we're absorbing all the time. So what he referred it to was like writing on a dry erase board with a permanent marker. And you can't get that off, but you're still using the same dry erase marker. So moving forward, you're trying to use the rest of the space, right? And then as those skills aren't practiced, or in this case, like medically declining, they get wiped away because they're actually more temporal than the permanent marker that were really like the beginning of your own sense of development, your own sense of identity. And so I would tell you, I would suggest, tell you to suggest, depends on what our relationship is, that when we say like, but I don't believe that anymore, we have to know it's in us and we are actively working around that kind of river rock, right? It hasn't been amputated. It hasn't been taken away. It is still absolutely in there. And so when, you know, like the funny TikTok videos that people take of each other in really vulnerable moments after they're done with surgery or something. So they're all drugged up and like all this stuff is coming out because they're not filtering, they're not using the skills that they've built up because they're not in a fully conscious state, right? Like, I think that's a really important thing to understand when we talk about becoming conscious of our unconscious, is that I don't have to have had my wisdom teeth out to be unconscious, because I could just be not paying attention in a grocery store. And that permanent marker stuff could come out even though I don't believe it because I'm not paying attention, right? So we have to be really cognizant of that. And I would say, as a pinko commie liberal, that one of the biggest harms the pinko commie liberals have done is that we have convinced ourselves that we read a book, we got a friend, we took a class, we wrote a book, we taught a class, and now that permanent marker is absolved. So now it's in there unconsciously. So I appreciate you sharing it, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That really makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is, and it was something else that we talked about, but was that sometimes, like, and this is like the collusion stuff, but that there are just times when I can't be around people that don't want, where I have to kind of consciously do that. That it's like that emotional capacity just isn't there right now. So I go and stay by myself.
And when you're by yourself, like grab a sheet of paper and do this little process and be like, what is up for me right now? Why is it easier for me to separate? And then can I go ahead and separate, but then do your own work, right? Like, what is that? Great. Any other easy, hard, next, or promises that you want to share with the group? Small but mighty February 12th Monday group. The one that I'll share that I didn't share with Meredith when we were in our group together, a very good friend of mine was going through seminary, and he's a really powerful speaker that I have looked up to as a mentor, etc. And we were at dinner one time, and he was telling me how he was probably in his second year of seminary when he realized that he supported any and everybody, regardless of their religious beliefs. He supported all of them because they all had the potential of accepting Jesus Christ. And I looked at him, and as soon as he said it, he was like, huh, that's not accepting of all people. That's accepting all people with the possibility of coming to my team. And we have to be really mindful of when we are accepting of people because there's an opportunity for them to choose better. because that's a judgment, right? Being accepting of all people means they have chosen better for themselves, and I have to be okay with that. And sometimes I'm not okay. And sometimes I try to be, right? Like, I'm thinking of another client that I had a co-facilitator with, and we both identify as queer people. And we were responding to an internal homophobic act that happened on their internal Slack. You don't need to get into all the details, but like, wow. So in doing all this, the big mantra of the company is bring your whole self to work. Okay. But what they really meant by bring your whole self to work was your secular, liberal, white, able-bodied, upper class self to work, right? So like you can be gay and lesbian, you can even be trans, that's fine. But the evangelicals that were hired felt very silenced. Conservatives felt very silenced at work. Even liberal Jews, liberal Muslims that worked, they had companies or locations in 11 different countries, 80,000 employees. If you were a secular, liberal, white, gay, lesbian, maybe trans person, you were totally welcome. And that was most of the company. It got all these awards for being like this great inclusive place to work. But it's not inclusive if other people feel silenced and marginalized. If we're going to talk about inclusion, then we need to include even the people that do not fit the mural that says we include everybody. Right. And so Meredith and I were having a conversation about prisons. If you want to abolish the industrialized prison complex, that sounds great. Where are you going to put people? Well, pinko commie liberals, we instantly go to, well, there's innocent people in there. That is totally true. Okay, so innocent people get to go live normal lives. What about not innocent people? Not in my backyard. Now we're back to prisons, right? So if we're talking about creating a community where everyone belongs and there is collective responsibility, then that means you don't get to vote anybody off the island. There are some people I'm very comfortable voting off the island. But am I a hypocrite, or do I just have my own work to do about my own belief systems? You don't have to answer that question. So, other thoughts or comments before we wrap up for the day? Don't forget to text 202-670-4262. Happy to help in whatever way I can. This has been Messages I Learned. There are a couple of more Messages I Learned with different lenses coming up in the series. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. I have gotten more and more conversations from some of y'all about doing internal book clubs. So that is an option. But I think we have enough people that we're probably going to do a follow-up book club with the participants. So make sure you sign up before the end of the webinar series. And it's time for retainer work. So the client that I was just talking about, my retainer work is usually about 3 months long. It's usually in response to a crisis, or one of their competitors had a crisis and they don't want to get caught in the same kind of situation. Spoiler alert, it's happening in your organization too. So if you are interested in any kind of retainer work or something, feel free to schedule an appointment with me. A number of you are here from another client that I did the IDI assessment tool with, which is a great way to look at intercultural development competencies within a team. I usually recommend this for diversity committees or ERGs. So if you set up an appointment or whatever, we can get 10% off and work together. That sounds super fun. The whole point of this series is Crazy Horse Memorial. So please feel free to use your employer match and make your own donation. I'm making a donation up to $2,024 because that is the year that it is. And based on current attendance, we are at about $20 per person. So thank you very much. I'll wait till the end of the series and then make my full donation, but I encourage you to do the same and use the employer match. Tomorrow, is a workshop. Here's some good foreshadowing. It's a workshop I almost didn't include because I both love it and hate it the most of anything that I offer. So we're going to be talking about humor. I love that. Is it cultural misappropriation? The answer is yes. And is it still funny? Maybe, depends on the context. We're going to talk a little bit about context and what it means with humor. I get to come out as a constitutionalist because we're going to be talking about protected speech and First Amendment freedom of speech and what that actually means. Spoiler alert, you are not constitutionally protected from being offended. That's actually kind of the point of democracy. But what does that mean? And then how, as an organization, can you choose to pick how you are going to create and foster more conversations inside of your own beliefs and values within your organization? So that's tomorrow. It is both my favorite and least favorite workshop. So I can't wait to see you there. And don't forget to schedule an appointment with me if you'd like to do some kind of retainer work together. That sounds super fun. Any other thoughts or comments? Can't wait to help. See you tomorrow.